We are in Philippians chapter 2. Following Paul's reflection, which we looked at the much of chapter 1, we moved into a discussion of Christian conduct where he was exhorting the Christians to stand firm together, even in the face of suffering. And we are still in the instruction section of the book, specifically that of Christian conduct among fellow Christians. We're kind of in that broader section. And so this is what we had looked at briefly last time. And I'm just going to skip through all this because this is what we had concluded. We had looked contextually at the way that these words need to be rendered because those are just kind of tricky in their renderings. And we also did a little bit of a reflection looking at some of the more practical lessons that we found in chapter 1. And so we were left with this conclusion. Let me find where we're at. Using the contextual paraphrase of verse 1, therefore, thinking on everything we've discussed, since there is a comfort found in a relationship with Christ, since there is an encouragement of love, since there is companionship with those of the same mindset, and since I have given you deep-seated emotional affection and mercy, ... That's where we are here today. All right. I'm excited, and I hope you are as well. Paul says, if there is anything to your Christianity whatsoever, hear me out. And so we have looked at this fourfold incentive, these four reasons for why you should do this, and now he's going to move into the next couple verses, which is a threefold directive. What should you do with this information, right? He says, fulfill my joy by being like-minded. In fact, let's go ahead and just read chapter 2, verses 2 through 4. Philippians 2, 2 through 4. Fulfill my joy by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. Let nothing be done in selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look not out only for his own interests, but also for the interest of others. Fulfill my joy by being like-minded. First thing he says is fulfill. Literally fill up. Like if you were to take like a cup of water, you were to pour a pitcher of water into it, my cup runneth over, Psalm 23. And you'll note that this is the second imperative, the second command that we've seen in the book. The first one was back in 127 with the command to let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ. Well, this is the second one. So second big thing that he's telling the Philippians to do. And he says that you may be like-minded, literally, that you may think the same way. And to think, we looked at this whenever we introduced the book of Philippians. To think is that word that is to have an internal disposition. Dispose your mind a certain way. It's one of the major themes that you're going to find within the book of Philippians, and it's especially prominent in this section. It's the same word that we've already looked at back in chapter 1, verse 7, when he says, just as it is right for me to think this of you all. Same word there. And so this idea of the kind of mindset the Christian is supposed to have is going to repeat itself quite a bit. And especially this is the first time we see it in this section. So like, the way I think about it is like rowers on a boat. You ever seen the Olympics? And is it the longboat where you have all the rowers and they're rowing in unison and they're all rowing in the same direction? Well, they're rowing together. They have a specific beat and a specific pattern, and they're all going in the same way. I mean, you're probably not going to get too far if you have two rowers who are kind of going to the right and never to the left. I mean, it's just not going to work. They're all focused in one direction, thinking the same way. Now, I want to introduce to you guys a technique that I use sometimes whenever I study a text. And the technique is called mirroring. The idea of looking at a mirror and looking at the reflection to see what was there. Let me explain what I mean by that. By mirroring the text, my goal is to find out with what Paul is discussing, what the present situation at that time must have looked like. Because not everything is expressly expressed of what the situation may have looked like for the people at Philippi. But based on the things that Paul brings up in the text, we can usually infer this is what is going on, or at least have some idea of what's going on. So here's the question for you all. If Paul is having to bring this to us so adamantly, this idea of needing to have the same mind, unity, what do you think is going on in the congregation at Philippi? Why does he have to bring this up? Right, there has to be something going on with separation, or maybe some form of division. Okay, let's take this to the next level. And I don't claim to have the one singular answer because I don't think it's really brought out, but I think there's a couple different answers, at least brought up within the text of Philippians. Some we've covered, some we haven't yet. But if you've read the book of Philippians before, where do you think this sense of division is coming from? Do we get any clues from a text? Okay. So what you are pointing to is what we find at the beginning of chapter 3, where there seems to be some kind of problem of Judaizing teaching. I think it's a possibility. And so, yeah, I don't know if everybody heard that, but the mixture of Jews and Gentiles, it's a problem that happened at a lot of different congregations, at least within the first century. And I think it could be a problem that you see here.
I think part of it is
their attitude, okay? So maybe it's not something, maybe it is just something implied where, though we don't have all the backgrounds and the specifics, we can infer that maybe there were some who were just, maybe they had an ego, maybe there was a sense of leadership that wasn't getting along. It could be a number of different things. The specific places, this is just when I was perusing through the text, when I was looking through it, I noticed chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. I also noticed chapter 4, verses 2 through 3, where there you have two women in the congregation who are, Paul has to tell them, hey, y'all need to get along, Euodia and Syntyche. A very expressive call out, which we'll get into later, but I think that's unique that he does have to call them out so expressly to say, y'all need to get along. Maybe just a personality conflict. We'll have to look at it later. But
chapter 1, verse 15 says, some are preaching Christ from envy and strife.
mm-hmm.
So there's some division, and some of it's coming from some of the preaching that's causing it.
Right. Now, remember, that particular preaching is what was going on in Rome. Back when we were looking over there, because we were looking at Paul's circumstance, because he's still imprisoned over at Rome, we were looking at the preaching in that area. But to say that maybe the Philippians are being influenced by some of that, I say that's a very real possibility. So maybe there are some who are getting pulled away by these different preacher personalities, those who are more self-seeking. Very well possible. One of the ideas that was presented, and I got to think about it more, is that maybe this division had come unintentionally from Paul himself. Let me explain. If you look in chapter 1, verses 4 through 8, Paul has to remind them how much he cares for each and every one of them. That's how he starts off this letter. He says, I really want to care for you. And it makes you wonder if maybe some members had felt outside of the circle of affection. You know how relationships can play out in a congregation sometimes, where some people have really great relationships with the ministers and others don't. And I think what may have happened here in Paul emphasizing how much love he has for the whole congregation, each and every person individually, is that maybe some didn't feel the same level of love. But what he says is that their unity would complete his joy. And so to say that it's particularly, Judaizing teachers or Yodia and Syntyche in particular, or maybe those who didn't feel as much love, it's hard to say. But what is prevalent is what we said at the beginning. There's something going on in the congregation. And for unity in a mindset to be such strong themes throughout the book of Philippians strongly suggests there's something going on in the congregation at Philippi. That's where we're at. He says, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. And having and being of one mind are both modifying the previous statement. So Paul, what he's doing is he's further defining what it means to be like-minded. Now, one accord, the way that it reads, being of one accord, probably not the best translation. It's an adjective, and it literally means united in soul. So a better rendering would probably be having the same love, together in soul, thinking the one. And maybe you could supply the word thing. Now, I'm not sure I agree 100%, but there's some who see a correlation between the four things that we saw in verse 1 and then the things that are presented here in verse 2, where you have an encouragement in Christ being connected with those of the same mind, a consolation of love for those of the same love, fellowship of the Spirit for those united in soul, and affectionate compassion to be intent on one purpose. Maybe that's something you go look into later and see, is there any one-to-one parallel between verses 1 and 2? Is he drawing on those ideas? Maybe so. But notice bottom line what he's trying to get across. Paul desired that they have the same affection with a deep relational unity and the same purpose and mission. We're not showing favoritism. We're not neglecting people. That's love. Everyone's involved. We care for each person individually. The same affection. And the same purpose, the same mission. That is, we're not aiming for all these different goals, and we're not self-promoting individuals. Purpose. Then he continues to say, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. So now what he's elaborating is what that one mind is. He had told them, I want you to have this mind, this one mind. Now he's modifying what that one mind is. And once we get down to verses 5 and 11, he's going to illustrate what that one mind is through the person of Jesus. He says, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. Now, we've seen the word for selfish ambition before. You go back to chapter 1 and verse 17. No, not 1:17. The 16, thank you. Yeah, former preach Christ from selfish ambition. So the same kind of idea of self-seeking above all things. I want what's good for me and me alone. It's very centered thinking. That's what it is. It implies trying to win followers, other people to care about me, even if that starts to cause some strife and some contention between other people. Selfish ambition and conceit. Now, conceit, I want you to think of the word empty. It is a vain or a self-exaggeration of yourself. And we'll call it an exaggerated self-evaluation. And the reason I say think of the word empty is because that's what the word comes from. There's nothing actually there. I have this perception that I'm all that in a bag of chips, but there's nothing actually there. It doesn't amount to anything. It's empty glory. When one tries to bring glory to themselves, it'll be empty and useless because there's nothing actually there. There's no substance. Selfish ambition and conceit. It almost makes me think of the concept of like a school bully, where you have someone who tries to prove that they're better than everyone because they're trying to make up for some kind of insecurity. I think that's kind of what you have going on here. You have people in the congregation or congregations abroad or whatever it may be who are really trying to push themselves on their brethren because they got things going on that they don't want other people to know about. And so you push either a strong personality or whatever it be to make up for your own insecurities. Now, that's just speculation on my part. I can't say that it is or is not that. But you think about how some of these things play out and why one might why one might be selfish or want to raise themselves up on a pedestal. He says, don't think that way. Let nothing be done in selfish ambition or conceit. But, on the contrary, in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Now, lowliness, that's a unique word. And it's different than some of the previous words. And as I was going through this, I was thinking, man, I think I've seen this word before, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. And then I realized I actually do know where this word's come from. And so I looked it up, and it is. The sermon that I got to preach a couple weeks ago out of Ephesians 4, 1 through 6, where in Ephesians 4, he's talking about the ideas of unity. That's the one Lord, one faith, one baptism passage. And he had talked about esteeming others better than yourself. This process that we engage ourselves in to achieve unity. And the word is a deep sense of one's moral littleness. It is the opinion that you have about yourself. It's how you see yourself. Having a humble opinion of oneself. He says, I want you to view yourself as low, as below others, as a servant. Again, about to be illustrated through the person of Jesus. But esteem others better than himself. I believe esteem and better are the same word in the original language. It is holding others above. To be at a point higher on a scale, to excel. It's like Think of the idea of a pedestal. If you were down in the stand and you have first, second, and third place, you are holding them up on that stand. You are putting them up there, and you are considering them. You are considering them to have more power or authority or importance. And what it doesn't mean is that the other Christian is better than you. Better is kind of a vague term anyway. But that you regard them better than you. It doesn't mean that they're any more faithful or any less sinful or anything like that, but that you consider their needs. Think about how a parent considers the need of their child, how they place their safety and their needs above their own. Did I see a hand over here?
Yeah, I was thinking that humbleness, that supplication, comparing ourselves to the Lord, puts us in that place to esteem others, puts us in a lower place if we're comparing ourselves to the Lord.
Sure. I mean, I suppose we all don't hold a candle to the majesty and, the grace of God. And I suppose the way to think about it is we've all been given grace to different extents, but we all need it. I mean, just as was preached earlier today, to those who have the ability to make decisions, the free will, all have fallen short of the glory of God. All need that grace. And so whether I've been in the church for 50 years or 5 years or 5 days, it doesn't so much matter. Either your sins are forgiven and you've put on Christ, or you haven't. Not to say that, you could continue the conversation. I'm not going to ramble, but we all need God's grace. And so considering God is perhaps a great way to consider the humbleness that we all need to have.
Also, this sort of Paul reverts what he's talking about here, Galatians 5, fruits of the Spirit.
Sure.
Chapter. That sort of reverts to this. He sort of really talks about it again in 5 verse 26, I think, where he's talking about vainglory and everything. He likes to talk about this a lot because he understands the spirit of man and what he can do.
Sure. And what he's doing there is he's contrasting the works of the flesh with the fruit of the Spirit and how these things are contrary. And those things probably come out here, and how you have Christians who are kind of giving way to the works of the flesh, even in their condition as a Christian. And so I think it's a theme that Paul repeats quite often in the epistles, because it's a problem that a lot of us face. It's difficult. We could go on and on about that, but I do want to tie it all together, because I think when it comes together, it's really important. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. Pay careful attention to, he says, the interest of others. Keep your eye on. If you wanted to add image, don't be looking through a scope only on the things that pertain to you. Broaden your field of view. Consider others. Now, what's interesting is that Paul does note value in considering yourself. He says, look not only out for your own interest, but look out for the interests of others, which implies that there is a time to look out for your own interests. Now, as Paul is going to expound on in the following section, you need to care about the interest of others so much more that you give less attention to your own things. And, okay, I've been using the word interest. The word interest is not there. Literally, it's the, or the things. It's very, very general. And so my question to you guys is, what things is he talking about? Is he what's he referring to if the word interest isn't there? Okay, so maybe that's the kind of the end goal that we're keeping in mind throughout all of this. I mean, that's the mindset that Paul had, certainly, the furtherance of the gospel. I suppose what I'm getting at is you're not just considering your own concerns, your own struggles, or even your own preferences for that matter. It is considering the things that other people care about, the things that are important to them. Okay. If there is a responsibility to care about your own things and to also care about the interest of others, what is the balance between bearing one's own burden, as is used in Galatians chapter 6, verses 4 and 5, and considering the needs of others? Where's the balance in that? Do I always consider my own needs, or am I always considering others' needs? When should I consider my needs, and when should I consider other people's needs?
I think the balance may be found in not neglecting either one.
In not neglecting either one. I like that. Did you guys hear that? No need goes neglected. That is whether it's your need or someone else's need. If there is a need, then it's not to be neglected. And so I suppose then it's a matter of priority. What needs need help more than others, which I would say probably the spiritual needs are the ones that need greater priority. But I would note the fact that a lot of times when Christians are helping other people, you're also helping yourself. I mean, when you as a member are serving and you're discipling or evangelizing or whatever it may be, when you're pouring into other people, a lot of the time you're also getting the spiritual benefit of having that relationship. And so perhaps the balance is to the point before you start regressing spiritually or becoming stagnant. Let me put this in terms of application so you kind of understand what I'm talking about. I think this is something that's tough for parents in particular, where they see the responsibility, the the God-given responsibility to seek after the physical, mental, and spiritual needs of their children, and to have them grow spiritually. And for as important as that is it possible that you focus so much on that now we've become neglectful of our own physical, mental, and spiritual development? Same thing can be said with preachers or leaders or any other position where you are called to pour into other people. The bottom line is it can't be to the neglect of your own soul.
Well, when he says, do not merely look out for yourself, so he's indicating that we've got to be there as well. Before we can actually be the comfort and the guide that we need to be to others, we need to already be there.
Right. Kind of like when you're in a plane and you have the oxygen masks. What do they tell you? You have to put yours on first if you're going to help anyone else. Okay. We saw Paul's review of all the spiritual blessings found in Christ, going back to chapter 1, called to be unified in purpose, content, and direction. And then we're called to humble ourselves, esteem others greater, and demonstrate that by considering their needs. And that is Philippians 2, 1 through 4. Next week, we get into, and I hope you're excited, because next week is the gem of Philippians, the most unique section of the book, and perhaps one of the most important for our lives. Look forward to being with you all next week.